No one comes back from the dead. No one has entered the world without crying. No one is asked when he wishes to enter life, nor when he wishes to leave. I spent a good amount of time trying to figure out how to start this video, but the best way may be to just start with a quote, so y'all know what we're about to get into. This quote comes from the Danish philosopher Soren Kierkegaard in his book Either Or. Now there's a bit of a story in this book that actually provides some context for quotes like these, so hope you got some milk and cookies because we're about to get into it. An unknown man passes by a store and sees a desk, and immediately they're captivated by it. Now you might judge this man, but come on, we've all been irrational consumers at some point. My weakness is a nice looking Hawaiian shirt. Now this man eventually buys this desk and discovers a secret compartment inside the desk. In it, he finds a collection of papers and sorts it out to reveal two different authors. One author is named A, and their papers are on the aesthetic way of life, and the other author is B, who writes more about an ethical way of life. The first set of A's papers is entitled the Diapsalmata, which is a collection of aphorisms about this aesthetic way of life, and that's the section the quote comes from and the section we'll look at today. I'm Paul, this is Philosophy Tunes, and you look really nice today. Now I want you to imagine what you think the aesthetic life means. No, not ascetic, but aesthetic. For me, I think about something similar to hedonism. I was recently in Spain over the summer, and I thought I was living the aesthetic life. I was partying most nights, eating great food, doing a lot of swimming, hanging out with cool folks, and I had a strong enjoyment of life. That's what I initially thought was meant by the aesthetic life. Unfortunately, as our intro quote shows, that doesn't seem to be the case for Kierkegaard. You see, the diapsalmata, which is a cool word by the way, is a collection of aphorisms explaining this aesthetic way of life, but it has themes of depression, boredom, regret, pessimism, and pretty much anything you'd intuitively label bad. So this is a far cry from what I expected the aesthetic life to be about. Instead, it seems to be about this. I say of my sorrow what the Englishman says of his home. My sorrow is my castle. Many consider sorrow one of life's comforts. This section is full of these memorable aphorisms about the negatives of life, and although they seem somewhat disconnected and ambiguous, there are some reasons why the aesthetic author thinks this way about life. One of these reasons are the expectations of a conventional life. I mean, we have these ideas about what a normal life means, and even if we may not want that, we're expected to follow one of those conventional paths. I saw the meaning of life was getting a livelihood, its goal acquiring a titular office, that love's rich desire was getting hold of a well-to-do girl, that the blessedness of friendship was to help one another in financial embarrassment, that wisdom was what the majority assumed it to be. In that quote, there's also these hidden absurdities of life pointed out. Specifically, the aesthetic is taking something we hold in high regard and revealing a ridiculous truth about it. For example, let's take excitement. We hold excitement in high regard, right? But really, we get excited for things like people getting paid lots of money to play pretend in front of a camera, so we could watch them on a streaming service for $10 a month. You see how the way something is framed can make it seem pretty ridiculous? This is kind of what's going on here with this quote. And this ridiculousness can lead one to a very negative interpretation of life. How empty life is and without meaning. We bury a man, we follow him to the grave, we throw 3 spades of earth on him, we ride out in a coach, we ride home in a coach, we take comfort in the thought that a long life awaits us. But how long is 70 years and 10? Why not finish it at once? Now you might be swayed by the poetic language, and yes, it is pretty memorable. But again, what's going on here is framing. I'm not a poet, so I'm not gonna try. But I'm sure someone could write about burial and life in such a way as to see it as a significant, meaningful event, and not at all ridiculous. Now this is not to say that there is an objectively correct way of framing something, like a burial, but as a biased pragmatist, I think it's helpful to ask what the pros and cons are of different frames. Obviously, if you take this aesthetic approach, you're gonna probably end up with a negative view of life and existence. Perhaps framing things in a more positive way will lead you to a more joyful experience, I don't know. So let's look at one last quote, probably the most famous out of this section. And again, pay attention to the framing. If you marry, you will regret it. If you do not marry, you will also regret it. If you marry or if you do not marry, you will regret both. Whether you marry or do not marry, you will regret both. If you hang yourself, you will regret it. If you do not hang yourself, you will regret it. If you hang yourself or you do not hang yourself, you will regret both. Whether you hang yourself or you do not hang yourself, you will regret both. Now the issue being talked about here is choice. And here the aesthetic is framing the concept of choice in terms of regret, obviously painting a pretty depressing picture. But again, this is not the only way to frame choice. I mean, sure, we all have regrets, but I'm sure you've also made decisions that you're proud of. A poet could write about choice in the context of gratitude, and you'll get an entirely different picture. And to me at least, it's not so much a question of what the right or wrong way to view something is. To me, it's a question of what the view will entail for your life, for your existence. And yeah, I know it's naive to assume that just framing things differently is going to solve all your problems, but it's something you could try out and see if it works. Results not guaranteed, but hey, doesn't hurt to try. Hopefully you got some good takeaways here. If you enjoyed the video, then subscribe, like, and hit the bell. And with that, I wish you all a beautiful rest of your day.